I think Islam hates us.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
Foundations of society are fragile. We must be the shepherds of our own civilization.
If anyone answers either yes or no without making necessary distinctions, both are not telling the truth. They're lying.
Father, we pray that your word will become a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. That you will raise up in this nation pulpits and prophets that will call the nation back to repentance.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
To frame today's discussion,
yes,
I want to read part of the opening crawl to the greatest Star Wars movie ever made, Revenge of the Sith.
Is it? The greatest Star Wars movie ever made?
Maybe not, but it's a good one. I love it.
I actually like it too.
War. The Republic is crumbling under attacks by the ruthless Sith Lord Count Dooku. There are heroes on both sides. Evil is everywhere.
Yep. Perfect. Now, who's Darth Maul?
Oh,
That's the most important part.
Okay, you've watched Clone Wars, right?
The funny thing is Clone Wars is the... What, you mean the series?
The series.
Or the... I've seen some. I haven't seen very much of it. I've seen some of it.
Darth Maul is like infinitely better in Clone Wars than the movies.
Oh, really?
Well, okay. The design and the choreography is amazing.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have a character.
Yes, I fully... Oh, I see what you mean. I would agree then, yes. He doesn't. He's very... either not well written or that's the way they wanted and the execution wasn't good. But yes, I understand.
Whereas in Clone Wars, they have like such a good character arc for him.
Mm-hmm.
And in the final season of Clone Wars that just came out, they actually had Ray Park, the actor from the original movie, kind of come and motion capture for the fight.
Really?
Yeah.
That's legit.
So
That's legit.
They've won on every level with him in Clone Wars.
Complete sidebar, and I'll keep it short because I don't want to take... I have limited time and I don't want to take too much of it from you. However, Darth Maul is actually my favorite Star Wars character.
Then you have to watch Clone Wars.
I probably should, yes. I know.
So at least watch all the Darth Maul episodes.
Yes, yeah, I think I will. Hey, what is it on Disney Plus?
Yeah.
Okay, it might be my next show then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing. If Darth Maul is your favorite Star Wars character, you're missing out by not... Like, I don't even conceive how Darth Maul could be someone's favorite Star Wars character without having seen Clone Wars.
That's a fair point. Oh, shoot.
Yeah. And then if you... I don't want to spoil anything, but if you kind of get to the end of Clone Wars and then, like, what's next, then let me know.
Okay, I will. All right.
Did you see Solo?
Yeah, I hate that movie.
But what did you think? So then, without having seen Clone Wars, how did you respond to the Maul cameo?
It felt like they're trying to get me to want something that I refuse to want because that movie was so bad. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, here's Darth Maul, and especially for me, a lover of Darth Maul, I was like, I'm not about to fall for this right now.
You'll hate it less after watching Clone Wars.
Okay, because it makes more sense.
It makes complete sense.
Okay,
and the reason I actually love that moment is spoilers for Solo for anyone listening.
Yeah.
On our Gospel and Race podcast, we have Star Wars spoilers. But the thing I loved about it was that, you know, with like the Marvel movies, that the TV shows reference the movies, but the movies never reference the TV shows.
Yes.
Like bringing Darth Maul back from the dead in Clone Wars is the most outlandish thing they did, right?
I see.
And that's established before Solo.
Yeah.
And the fact that Solo makes reference to that means that anyone in a TV series can show up in a movie at this point.
Interesting. Yeah, and I actually appreciate that continuity because it feels snobby sometimes the way Marvel hasn't. Well, I would say Star Wars is guilty of this too, but the way Marvel hasn't really interacted with TV shows. But yeah, that's very interesting. Okay. Solo's still a bad movie though.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of opinions on that, right? The continuity thing is amazing.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay.
So it becomes more than that. So
yes.
moving from Star Wars to Earth Wars.
I love that intro though. Yes.
So obviously right now, for people watching this in the future, if anyone does, right now we're kind of moving through some national unrest as a guy called George Floyd was killed by a cop who knelt down on his neck for 9 minutes, as well as a slightly, to be honest, goofy incident in Central Park, and a string of other things. And then the country has now erupted into protests and riots. So tell me where your head's been at through all this.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, and I've been like nonstop talking, which is weird because I'm usually talk to a certain group of people when something happens like this. But lately I've been talking to like everyone, and it's been really good for me in trying to understand how to think about this the right way. So, man, I'm just gonna talk. I won't qualify anything. I think a lot of things that have happened racially, politically, like with race. This is just my opinion, but with race issues in America, a lot of stuff has been so politicized that it's been hard to look at these incidences and figure out what the actual issue is. Like, so if I can give an example, and I'm not saying, so my memory of this is a little bit, it's been so long that I don't remember the details, but so this might be a little bit of a crude or insensitive example. I don't mean it like that. But if I look at the very first incident of this, I don't remember his name, but the guy who got killed, I can't remember his name, but I guess that's not relevant completely. But basically, the details of the case were enough to where some of the cries of like, "You killed this man in broad daylight," didn't necessarily line up with perhaps justification. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So then. And I didn't know this back then, but I think it would have been still fair to ask, well, why are these people hurting? Because certainly this can't be the result of one incident, because it doesn't necessarily match the level of outcry. Does that make sense? And actually, so here's a little backstory that I won't necessarily get into now, but if I were a white person for the first 25 years of my life, you could call me a racist. I did not really care for black people. I had a lot of self-hate, and a lot of this came from just the weird experiences I had as a child with black people, being made fun of. It honestly kind of started with that. So it kind of warped and I've heard other black people say this, but like growing up, I would always see myself as an older person, as a white dude. In fact, have you ever played the game Final Fight?
No.
Okay, so it's a Super Nintendo game, but I would always see myself as this guy named Mike Hager from the game, like this buff white dude. I have no idea why. But anyways, I guess that showed like the identity issues that I had. I had a lot of identity issues, and that was one of them. Around the time of that incident, that I can't remember the guy's name, God really started to address that prejudice that I had towards other black people. And not feeling black enough or whatever, because that was a lot of the issues that I felt too, because I was in the, the stuff that we're into, what we opened the show with, right? But feeling like, because of my love of electronic music, anime, whatever, stuff that now is normal,
mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I belonged to the black community or whatever. All right. So anyways, as that has to do with this issue, God started to show me, he introduced me to a dude named Wado, which I think started me, and he's like a DJ producer, does a lot of interviews like this. And it helped me to see that a lot of these incidences, what we're seeing, and I would say, I think God is letting us see these instances of police brutality. It's more like it's more to bring the attention to what these communities have been talking about this entire time, rather than there's an issue with policing. Because I do think it's fair to say at scale, there isn't an issue with policing. But there is, I would say, an issue with the way Black people or people of color are looked at, and perhaps maybe even more broadly, the way the poor are looked at. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's tricky because, like, so with this George Floyd incident, the first thing, I'm sorry if you can hear the police car, ironically, the sirens in the background. But, so with this George Floyd incident, the first thing I thought was like, okay, I don't know why he's on the ground. I don't know if his death was a direct result of this. One thing that is not controversial, that we can all be sure of, and we don't have to wait for any evidence because we have it. The way he was knelt on for 9 minutes, you shouldn't treat anybody like that. It doesn't matter what they did. There's no amount of force that is proportionate. Excuse me, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter what they did. There are certain life and death situations where that type of restraint can be appropriate. Right. But in this context, he's handcuffed. He's already subdued. There's not much he can do. When you're belly down, you don't really have any leverage. It doesn't take much force to keep someone down. So for you to deliberately place your knee on his neck like that, I think says something about what you think either of him as a black person or a criminal or a poor person, if he's poor, or all of them together. You know what I'm saying? So there's some view of human dignity that is lost in that moment. And I think that is the most important aspect that needs to be addressed. So you can kind of push aside all the I mean, it isn't irrelevant, but I would say that would be the best thing to focus on. Does that make sense?
Right. And biblically that makes sense as well, because I think if you look at the mandate for biblical law, it's impartiality.
Exactly.
And the problem with racism is that it's partiality.
Yes.
Right. And what needs to be restored is the impartiality.
Yes.
So while we don't know the specifics of the case, right? We don't know if this guy is intentionally trying to murder a black man,
mm-hmm.
or if he's just pissed off and is taking that out on this guy for no reason. Either way, his anger and his actions resulted in a man's death, and the man needs to face justice for it.
Yes.
So with all that aside, right, that has been pretty widely agreed upon, right? But there's still a pretty large reaction from several directions here. Why do you think, despite this being fairly widely condemned, why do you think that reaction is still there?
Yes, that is a very good question. That's a very good question, because that's something I've been thinking about, and I don't know that I have an answer, because but I've been thinking about it a lot. Because there's all these cries for justice, and those are great, and there's all these cries for to condemn this, and I feel like among our kind of our demographic age group or whatever, it's pretty unanimous. What we're seeing on social media, I guess, is pretty unanimous. What it is in real life, who knows? But I guess what I suspect is that maybe on a smaller scale, these communities who have been complaining, I guess I could lump it all into quality of life and historic offenses. So I'm not an expert in detail stuff like say redlining, like people who were denied houses or whatever grievances in the racial category there is. But I feel like the outcry is more symptomatic of feeling not listened to, feeling frustrated, and feeling like they're stuck in a cycle of our life sucks and nobody cares. And I think that the solution's not easy, but I think the reactions and the protests is kind of like a hysterical response to what people in these communities have always been saying. The one thing that I hear a lot when I have conversations with specifically Black people is, we've been saying this all along. And I don't think they mean we've been saying the police have been brutalizing us all along, but pick anything not having a decent grocery store in their neighborhood, you know, where the grocery store is 7-Eleven, and being denied housing, or feeling not listened to, feeling like they're telling ghost stories when they talk about this racist thing happened to me. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of what you think about the truth about these issues, here's a decent example, because I'm still working through this myself. I watched a sermon that a friend recommended to me, and in the sermon they had like a black lady, Mexican lady, a Native American lady, basically everyone non-white, and they all shared instances of racism that they had happen to them. And as I'm watching this video, for a second I was like, well, because they're explaining an interaction that they had, and I'm thinking like, well, was that really racist? However, whether or not the person interacting with them was actually being racist, the way they experienced it felt racist. And I think it's important to empathize and listen to them initially. Then we can talk about maybe the nature of what actually happened. But I think one of the biggest issues right now is, and I've been writing about this on Facebook as well, if you've read some of my posts, but is empathy. And I think the lack of empathy for these communities is what has resulted in this type of reaction, because like, you won't listen to us if we share in a normal way. So now we feel like we have to do something, for better or for worse, that will hopefully start a conversation. Does that make sense?
Right. So that regardless of the truth of the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's several different things you could break them down, and it's possible that this whole George Floyd thing breaks down. There's not an ounce of racism in it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's reminding people of something they really have experienced.
Yes.
That
exactly.
is a real thing that's bringing up memories for them.
And it's functionally the same, precisely, because when you see the image of a black dude with a knee on his neck begging, please get off me, whether or not this officer's actions can be attributed to other factors, for one, they're not good. Whatever the reason he did it, it's still bad. But coupled with the fact that it's this very vivid image of a black man, their experience is the same as dude wearing a white hat burning a cross in the front yard. You know what I'm saying? So when they're not listened to and it's immediately dismissed as, well, that's not actually racist, I think it misses the point, because the hurt is what should be addressed. Not, we can talk about the truth, and I don't mean the truth in the sense of like capital T truth. This event didn't really happen type of truth, but I should say the nature might be a better word. We can talk about the nature of the event later, but what needs to address are the very real sentiments of how these communities are feeling. And it isn't just policing. Their anguish isn't just from policing. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So yeah, now we have riots. And then even in the riots, like, and this is hard because there's just so many people and we really have no idea, but even seeing stuff like people who are just there, people who are not from these communities who are just there to cause problems. Like there's videos of people dressed in all black. Not that a white person can't be both for this cause and, loot or whatever, but there are people who are clearly have nothing to do with these events, who are burning stuff, and then that gets associated with the protesters. You know what I'm saying? So it makes all of this, it just makes it, there are people who will see that and walk away from it thinking, yeah, see, they're just burning stuff. And their conclusion is, these people just want stuff. They don't want change. They just want free stuff.
My favorite looting image is the white guy wearing a sort of just a medical mask, like sneaking out of Target with some Lego.
Yes. So, exactly.
So this is the impression I'm getting, because I actually went downtown Seattle to kind of research.
Oh, really?
Earlier, just kind of like look at all the damage.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what it seems happens, right, is that, so I talked to my friend who was there, who was kind of on the ground when this is happening. And he said that there's kind of three main factions. There's probably others as well, but you have a you have a group of people who are peaceful protesters. Then you have mostly white Antifa members who are starting stuff with the police, right? Because you don't just bring rocks and Molotov cocktails if you're a peaceful protester, right? It's not like, honey, where's the strollers in the garage? Like, where are the Molotov cocktails?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
People, and there's nowhere to find rocks in downtown Seattle. You have to bring them
Yes.
to start that, right? Then the police get on edge. The crowd gets on edge, and it just sort of turns everything into a powder keg.
Right.
And then my friend says, and he knows this quite well, everyone he saw actually looting was part of a gang.
Right, they were all together? Or
they're all
associated?
together. It's a coordinated effort, right?
Yeah.
So somebody's saying, okay, because the police are here, let's go loot this place, right?
Oh.
So it's not like they're, oh, we're so sad about George Floyd's death, let's raid Target.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, chaos is happening right now. That they're not there to protest. Now they may be in their own little way.
Yeah.
They are there to loot, using the protest as cover to do that.
Yeah.
And that is now tarnishing the reputation of people who are legitimately trying to communicate something they're hurting over.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because there's something else that I've noticed that I think points towards, this is controversial, but I think this points towards how people do view Black people or people, or and I could be wrong, but this is just my opinion. It's something I have seen that is, it's not good. Somebody can look at the instance of police brutality with George Floyd and say, let's wait for the facts to come in. Let's see the reasons behind it. Was he resisting arrest? And so basically they show a level of discernment. When it comes to looting, that same discernment is not applied. It's simply, these protesters are bad. They say they want to protest George Floyd's death, but look at their looting. To me, that shows me, like, whatever you think of the word unconscious bias and all, and that whole genre of things, I'm not here to talk about that. Whatever you think of that, when if you are a person who does that, you do suffer from some type of bias that you are not aware of. Because to me, you are doing what the Bible calls, and I hope this isn't stretching it, using unequal weights, like you say. You're using one metric to judge this incident. You're not applying that to the looting.
Right.
Because it very drastically changes the nature of these protests if you can discern that not all of the looting that is happening is at the hands of the protesters, and we don't even know how much. It could be none of the protesters are looting. You know what I'm saying? Hypothetically. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's very important, and I think that things like that, when they come out in times like this, I think it's a shame if the only thing people walk away from is, with the rioting at least, is that these are just troublemakers, and this is just what happens. These people are just angry and they don't want change. They just want their little list of demands or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And they won't do the hard work of trying to look past some of the violence and focus on why this happened in the first place. And the hurt. Again, it just comes back to the hurt and empathy, if that makes sense.
It seems like there's almost two scales there, right? There's people who the looting, the people who just kind of want their little slice of the cake.
Mm-hmm.
The rioting is almost that people. What's fascinating to me about this is that you not only have rioting in Seattle for what happens in Minneapolis, which is a completely different police department, but you also have the same rioting in, like, London.
Right.
Because I think, I honestly believe that a lot of people don't really want tangible solutions to the issues.
Mm-hmm.
That I think, and those people are hurting the people that do.
Yes.
So if we have so 80% there who just want some tangible, concrete, okay, well, if we could have this thing in place, it'd be helpful. You have some people who just don't even care. They just want to get their slice of the pie. And other people who the only solution they want is revolution.
Exactly. And I I wanted to ask you if I could, because this is another area that I feel like in this discussion around rioting, or yeah, it's all this. Like, I've heard from a lot of white people that they feel they've kind of been okay, and maybe I need to say this too. So, one thing that I feel like hasn't helped any of this is, at least on like some of my black peers or whatever, is making people feel like if they don't do these A, B, and C, they're a part of the problem, or their contribution is not helping. I've always thought that, look, God gave everybody different gifts, different burdens, different life experiences. You have a voice that is needed, but the way you express that, that's between you and God, because I can't look at the way God made me and then say, so therefore you do as well. And I've been seeing something. I've been seeing a lot now. Thankfully, Jackie Hill Perry and then another dude I follow, Belief, they said something that I thought was very helpful, and they did say, like, look, don't let somebody make you feel like you need to speak or you need to speak in a certain way. You're allowed to process this the way that you want to. You know what? Some people, they'll have a conversation with a friend. You'll never hear about it on social media. That does more a lot of times than a post about it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, like, I'm wondering, have you felt, because I've had a lot of my white friends say like they felt kind of bullied into just silence because they can't meet these criteria that they feel like they're obligated to meet. So rather than risk the flame war that they're going to get if they post, they've kind of sunk into silence. Have you felt that way at all, or know anyone who's felt that way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think I actually think this is doing a great deal of damage, because I think the sort of social media climate we live in amplifies this a great deal.
Definitely.
Right? So I saw a pastor I know who talked about, just did an overarching post about George Floyd and the riots, having a very balanced perspective on all of it. And a woman in the comments saying, why didn't you say anything when George Floyd was murdered? And he said, well, I saw lots of voices saying something about this. I didn't feel like I had any specific need to add to that chorus. And then she responds by saying, I said anyone who didn't say anything was canceled. You are canceled. Literally in those words.
That actually happened?
Yeah, it actually happened.
That's crazy. That's like a TV show.
It is. I saw that. So my perspective is that biblically, the actual work of race relations, right? Harmony between different ethnic and cultural groups is a lot more mundane than what people want to do, right? Go to a protest, hold up a sign, post it on social media. Okay, yay, I'm helping. You might not be, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, good for you for saying what's true and right, but it doesn't actually necessarily make things any better.
Right.
The single greatest force, the second greatest force I've ever experienced for harmony between white people and black people is Dragon Ball Z.
Woo, talk about it.
Right, so
talk about it.
So anywhere I go, if I'm wearing a Dragon Ball Z shirt, I'll make black friends.
Yep. It's true. It's very true.
So I think pop culture and more than that, just sort of doing life with people and actually getting to know people. So in Seattle, this is my analysis of the issue, right? So if I go on a Sunday morning to a church service in Seattle and somebody who's black walks into the building and sits down and they sit on a row next to the average white congregant, the average white congregant isn't like being like, how dare this lower man sit next to me? What they're thinking is, great, we have diversity in our church. I should say hi, but I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing. So they just keep their distance.
Yeah.
Right. And then it kind of goes both ways, right? Because of everything the African American community has gone through in this country, there is a fear of being judged by white people. And there's a fear of being judgmental by white people, and it creates this culture of fear that people are terrified to interact with each other.
Yep. That is profoundly true. At least it may not have been always been that way, but it has been getting steadily worse. And it's funny because I was just talking to my friend, and I'd made I wouldn't call it a racial joke, but I think someone could see it that way. And she kind of parroted it back to me, and it was funny. Like in a normal world, nobody would think twice about it. But I know for a fact in this climate, because everybody is so edgy, there's somebody who would either hear that and think, "Ooh, I wouldn't say that if I were you." Like, just let him say that. And I feel like that. I feel like as a Christian, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Something profound about human nature and the way God, I think, intended us to relate to each other as different races is lost if she can't say that. And trust me, this was nothing of even remotely offensive. Here's another example. That's precisely what you're talking about. One of my wife's friends, she braided her hair, and there was like some type of influencer who had cornrowed their hair, maybe, right? So let me just say, Black people don't have a lock on cornrows. White people, Mexican, whoever, if you want cornrows, like, do it. It's not an issue. It's hair. But I think something happened with the influencer's sponsor. They asked her she did like an ad for them with cornrows, and there was some pushback. And so she redid the ad without cornrows, and I might be getting it a little bit wrong, but basically the issue was you shouldn't have cornrows because you're a white person. So my wife's friend had her hair done the same way, and she was so uneasy about it that she asked Lauren, "I wonder what your husband would think about my hair." That's actually crazy. You know what I'm saying? And the funny thing is, Lauren said her hair wasn't even cornrowed. It was like normal braids. So it's just like people have been saying, like, we don't need to cater to the way white people feel right now. As a Christian, like, would Jesus say that? Probably not. Probably not. Because I think if the goal is reconciliation, you're going to do whatever it takes to get us reconciled. If your goal is power, then I think, that might be controversial. But if your goal is power, I think you might say stuff like, we shouldn't cater to white people right now. Because, again, I think that is using an unequal, maybe unequal isn't the right word, but an unfair way of addressing people who are in many ways innocent of a lot of the charges that you're levying against them, charges of racism or whatever. And if you can't be sensitive to how they're feeling, I just don't know how are we supposed to have a conversation then, you know what I mean? If we can't even get to a point where we feel comfortable talking to one another.
And you know, I think a lot of this climate, right, is externally imposed on people.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ironic thing, right, is, in my mind, is political correctness is what kind of governs race relations right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally couldn't think of anything whiter.
You're absolutely right. That is brilliant. You are totally right. Oh my God.
It's like we say, all these rules about you, when you meet this kind of person, you say this and you don't say this and you don't say this. Like, have you ever hung out with Black people before?
It's true. Yes, it's true. It's so true.
Like, nowhere else you go in the world do people act like this.
Yes. That's brilliant. It's so true though. And it's funny because, like, it reminds me of, like, when Dave Chappelle got in trouble for, like, his stand-up. It's just like how far have we come, where right now I feel like we can't, there are many reasons why, but we can't even really have a conversation anymore unless you belong to a certain way of thinking about this issue. And I mean, unless you want everybody to just be dishonest, you know what I mean? And then what good is it? Like, that problem still isn't solved. So I feel like if I had a criticism for both sides, my criticism, like, of Black thought on this issue, and obviously it's not everyone, but it is a common sentiment. It's like, you need to let white people express themselves even if they don't disagree with you. They don't need to meet your standards. You need to get to know them and have real conversations. And then on the white side, I think more empathy for these people, and you need to surrender some of your preconceived ways of thinking about how things should be, and you need to maybe consider somebody else's experience isn't the same as yours. For instance, with the Ahmaud Arbery case, some of the conversations I had, and this is a sentiment that just doesn't make sense to me. I've heard things like, well, if he had just complied with these, and now I'm inserting my own color here, if he had just complied with these strangers with Call of Duty loadouts, things would be fine, right? It's like, uniquely as a black man, and I don't know if this is a good thing, but if a strange white man rolls up on me with a gun, I'm thinking American History X. I'm not thinking, let me find out what this dude wants, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, when I hear white people say these types of things, or like, I really wish he wouldn't have attacked them. Like, what would you do in that situation? Like, I think there's white people who would have died in that same situation.
Yeah, I think I'd have died.
Yeah, right.
I'd have been like, maybe I'd have tried to get out with it by making jokes, but I would, like, at that point, I'm thinking.
Right. You're not thinking these people who've been chasing me in a truck and have a sawed-off shotgun, well, I don't know what he had, and a Magnum. Like, I'm not thinking I don't know why. I have no reason to, what am I trying to say? I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you're here. So you're either going to kill me or I'm going to defend myself and you're going to kill me. You know what I'm saying? Like, Ahmaud's response was very normal in that situation. Right. So it's like, when white people share these sentiments that I think are detached from other people's experiences and detached from the black community's experience in a lot of ways in these scenarios, and media and just things they know of history, things their parents have been through, that to me, it reinforces some of the stereotypes that black people have of you really don't understand the black experience. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
I think, yeah. So you need equal weights and measures. Mm-hmm. You need to listen well. But I think we have to do something about this culture of fear.
Yes.
And that's on several levels, right? Mm-hmm. That's one, the fear that someone may have subconsciously when they see someone who's black, mm-hmm. but also the fear of saying the wrong thing, to seek to be hard to offend and trying not to offend others and kind of leaning in. Because honestly, in almost any culture I'm dealing with, mm-hmm. forget the rules of the culture, anyone who's friendly and honest will usually do fine.
Yeah. Friendly and honest. Those are two, especially when you put them together, friendly and honest. It's very hard to do, and I respect that. It's taken me a long time. I credit people like Greg Kokel and Ravi Zacharias, rest in power, with helping me to get to a point where you can hear other people who maybe even violently, not like physically violent, but aggressively disagree with you, still be friendly. I have a friend who I've been talking to a lot around all this, who I'm truly thankful to God for, because he thinks very differently on these issues, at least the way he communicates about it. But we have both been friendly and honest, and it's really helped me. It's helped me to not skewer my opinion to think honestly that white people just don't care. Like, it's prevented me from feeling like I'm right in thinking that because this continues to happen, white people don't care. And I really think when you cancel people and you alienate yourself from people who don't agree with you, you just reinforce you. You know what I'm saying? And you don't, like, you can't, I mean, I know this is obvious, but you can't get through life alone. You know what I'm saying? You're not an island. You can't figure these issues out on your own. So if white people continue to alienate black people because they don't buy some of the stories they're saying, or vice versa, it will just continue to reinforce these two camps, and we'll just keep seeing what we've been seeing. You know what I mean?
I think we need people who care deeply about people. But also, one thing I was thinking about this is that if you look at Jesus' day, Jesus embodies caring about people, but he also refuses to get co-opted into any of the revolutions happening in his time. And it's not because he doesn't care about social issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's because he knows that the real work of harmony between people and peace and justice is a lot quieter and in some ways more mundane
Mm-hmm.
than these kind of giant revolutionary causes.
Mm-hmm.
And the real work doesn't necessarily look like holding a flag, standing in the streets. It's food. It's conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like at the risk of sounding corny, like that in itself is a revolution. You know what I mean? Because that is right now, that I guess the way Jesus handled a lot of these things is very, in many ways, cultural, especially if you expand it to just our political climate in general. Because I do think that has an influence on this issue. Just how America's just progressively gotten more and more tribal through each election cycle. So yeah, I that's very insightful for you to point out, with Jesus not getting caught up in, you know, the disciples thinking that Jesus was going to be this revolutionary figure, even though he was, just not in the way that they imagined it would be. So, and that's not to take away anyone's expression of how they choose to act. Like God, like I said earlier, God gives everybody different, especially the church. I would say, I mean, I'm really talking about the church, gives everybody different gifts and things to do. But I think honoring other people's different ways of processing this and dealing with this is really important right now. Yeah, if that makes sense kind of with what you just said.
Yeah. And I think the big difference is that I've been playing it out somewhat arbitrary, but revolution versus reformation, right? Revolution is all about finding the system, tearing it down and replacing it with something. Reformation is about building something. It's about building something better and having something to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as Christians, we don't need to wait for the world to change to build something better.
Ooh, preaching. Yeah. So this is something that maybe I could ask you, because I don't quite know the answer, but in saying that, like, if you can imagine, what would it look like to you for the church to have a meaningful response to start this arc of reformation? And I'm not saying like you have to have the complete A to Z, but like, do you have an opinion on that? Because that's something that I don't like. People keep saying like the church needs to do something, and I agree with that, but I'm struggling to think like, what does that even look like? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I've got a kind of vague idea in my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
But first, all change starts with first examine your own heart before dealing with other people,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the revolutionary mindset. The revolutionary mindset is, okay, we'd be better if the system was better. The Bible says, before you remove the speck from your neighbor's eye, first deal with a plank in your own eye. Right? It starts with self-examination. Then judgment starts in the household of God, right? So then we want to focus on this. And I think one clear way that does not just impact like race relations, and I hate saying that, it's just convenient.
Yeah.
I don't believe in races, except maybe the Saiyan race.
Which I am proudly part of, by the way.
Right. But yeah, I'd say, yeah, I'm a Dragon Ball fan before I'm an Englishman, but but one of the qualifications of being an elder in the church is this word philoxenos. Is translated as hospitable, but it literally means a lover of outsiders. So the way I try and embody this is I'm always trying to look out for people that don't quite fit in, and regardless, or new people, right? So I don't specifically say, okay, I'm looking for black people here because they might not fit in. But because of the because of the climate, because of the sort of ethnic climate we're in,
Yeah.
I notice new black people more easily, right?
Yes.
So I'll say hi because I say hi to new people.
Yes.
And I want to help people become more connected to community. And we want to make sure that no one's being excluded from our community who is kind of an outsider, right? And if we're just aiming for that, we will kind of catch the ethnic stuff under a kind of catch-all umbrella. Because right now, Christians are a minority in Seattle, right? So we could say, well, this law, and this law should be enacted. And, okay, we can say it, but we don't have the momentum to actually go and change any laws.
I see, yeah.
But we can do what we can.
Yeah.
And if you see something that's wrong, you stand up to that. You
Yeah.
get in the way of it. But a lot of the time, you won't.
Mhm.
And you have to focus on positively building the kind of community you're in to be a community that doesn't exclude people for whatever reason.
Yeah. So you feel like it would more be the responsibility of the church, at least initially, to, within their own communities, be a reflection of what society should look like? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean we don't have anything to say to society.
Yeah.
We certainly can.
Yeah.
But we're not in the place to put our energy into reforming non-believers, right?
Mhm.
We're specifically told not to judge those who are non-Christians.
Mhm.
And I think the question everybody who's sort of an activist in this should answer is, would you rather make a racist not a racist, or would you rather make a racist a Christian? Right? That's kind of ground zero for what we're here to do. And we need to make sure our own communities are not full of partiality, right?
Yeah.
That's what the Bible's focused on, not so much in the wider world, even though it acknowledges that as an issue,
Yeah.
partiality.
Yes.
But we have to focus on what we can actually do something about. And then from there, if we do it well, then we can export it.
I see. That makes sense. So it's almost like if your own house isn't in order, it's hard to extend that to outside the church. Is that kind of what you're saying with that last bit?
Yeah. And what Jesus calls us to be is a city on a hill for the world to see. So our focus should be on building a place where somebody is not arbitrarily judged by the color of their skin.
Yeah.
That we're impartial, we respect the image of God in all people, and that we look after our people, right?
So, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was going to ask you. So that's interesting because I've never really considered this. Would you feel like maybe, in your opinion, because maybe many of our churches are not in order in regards to race, that is sort of why, like, you'll see something where an artist like Lecrae posts condolences for someone who's lost their life, and then will get slammed by his Twitter followers for being leftist. You know what I'm saying? When he's really not even addressing politics at all. He's just showing sympathies for someone who's lost a son. Would you say, seeing that from the church, because I mean, I would assume most of his followers are Christians, that is a result? I guess that kind of shows where the church is at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does, right? Because so how I'd analyze a situation like that is that he's rightfully addressing condolences. There's nowhere in my mind that what's going on here breaks down better than the hashtag Black Lives Matter, right? So if you look up blacklivesmatter.org, like the official website of Black Lives Matter, they have a manifesto, parts of which are completely banana bird, communist, antithetical to Christianity, right? But so the conservatives see that and see anytime somebody posts Black Lives Matter, then they're thinking, okay, well, they're forwarding this communist manifesto, right? But I think
spot on.
That for most black people I've talked to about this aren't even aware that Black Lives Matter has like an official website.
Correct.
Right. They're just thinking people are getting killed by police and
Yes.
there's racism and Black Lives Matter. They're not thinking, we want to destroy capitalism and remove the nuclear family and that sort of stuff. And so people get confused, and people need to be able to kind of pass out and differentiate and think maturely about this.
Yes.
And when we get caught up in politics, we don't do that.
Yes.
And so you've got to be able to stand against legitimate worldview threats. And those exist, right? Yeah. While realizing that the reason those legitimate worldview threats exist is because of real problems, real injustices, and things that we're not talking about properly.
You are, man, I wish I could like save that and replay. That's a perfect snapshot of, I think, like, wow, you just brilliantly summarized what I feel like is kind of the thing right now, the divide. Like you're so right. Most Black people don't know that it's not just a hashtag. And yeah, I know a little bit of backstory with Black Lives Matter as an organization. And, but I know that like when people say that it's so detached from that, but I have seen conservatives, and I will say conservative. I've seen conservatives levy those claims. So yeah, very brilliant. Yeah. Sorry. I just made what you said a little bit worse. So I won't touch it again. Yes.
Well, so ultimately, in a world that's looking for simplistic solutions, right? Mm-hmm. We as Christians cannot go into those simplistic solutions. We've got to approach everything through the lens of Scripture. We've got to hold up the biblical standards with even hands, using equal weights and measures, as you said, and focus on what we can do, right? Make actual tangible steps to be more hospitable, to listen better, and listening better doesn't mean compromising. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, the thing people are missing. Yeah, is that you don't have to, you don't have to compromise what you believe. You don't have to get, if you have concerns about what's happening, right? That you don't have to leave those at the door, but you do need to listen.
Mm-hmm. And I think, just to say this too, because I think somebody could hear you or I say we need to listen better and just throw it into like the Oprah Winfrey junk pile of just quotes. But I really think like the phrase "listen better" right now, it is a lot more meaningful. It's a lot heavier than people realize. Yeah. So like in saying that, I hope somebody wouldn't hear that and just kind of roll their eyes and think, oh yeah, I already know that. Like, no, really listen better, because if we were listening better, things would really probably be a lot better right now. And I mean, as we see every political cycle, every election cycle rather, like people don't listen well, like at all. It's ingrained in our culture to speak rather than listen. Mommy said God gave you 2 ears so you can listen twice as much.
Speaking of mommy, my favorite news footage from today is there was a looter, and it was the looter was black, but his mom found him and was like beating him and like dragging him into riots.
Oh my gosh, that is awesome! That is awesome.
It was hysterical.
That is awesome. Yeah.
So I think we have some stuff to work with there. So yeah. To conclude, to completely capture the point of this,
yes.
On behalf of all white people everywhere, I am sorry.
Oh my gosh! Listen, if it at this rate, you could expect an order. What is it? Order 61. What's that order?
Order 66.
I just blew the joke. Is it order 66? The joke's over now. Now I just want to know what the order is. The Jedi or the
order 66.
60, is it 66?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's your favorite Jedi?
Plo Koon.
Okay, I know who that is, but you have to read the books to know more.
No, he's just gonna. Okay, so it all came from Jedi power battles. He's just kind of this weird alien with like, he looks like a bad guy, but he has a yellow lightsaber.
Oh, yes, I know who you're talking about. Why is he your favorite?
I just like playing as him, and I like
Okay,
that
okay, yeah.
I like that it's different in the game.
Yeah.
It's probably Anakin as far as from a character level, but I always like Plo Koon.
I'm glad you said Anakin, because as much as I don't really like the prequels, I actually, so Lauren rewatched it pretty recently, like maybe a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago, before, I don't know when. But Anakin's, he's actually, there was something in his character development that I appreciated. He's a good character. I like him. I know people like to hate on Anakin, but he's a good character.
But you add the Clone Wars to it, it gets so much better.
Oh, because he's in. Yes, of course. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
So the characterization gets better.
Yes.
So
anyway, yes.
There is one way that the differing sides on this can be reconciled.
No.
But you've got to do that. You've got to do it exactly right. You then
By the way, it's funny that you mentioned Dragon Ball and black people. And okay, yeah, whatever. This is bonus material, I guess. I've always wondered. So I'm glad you said that, because I've noticed for some. Well, I don't know why. I do feel like a disproportionately higher amount of black people like Dragon Ball Z than other cartoons. And I've always wondered why, like, black people, I feel like, play fighting games more than other types of games. Because, like, I play online games all the time, and like Call of Duty, there's a lot of black people do play Call of Duty, because I think a lot of people just play that game. But I've just noticed I run into the most black people in like the fighting game community and Dragon Ball. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've never quite figured out why that is.
Yeah,
I mean, I love Dragon Ball.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm evidence.
I'm not entirely sure what it is.
Yeah.
But I've just several times I like to just my wife's very uncomfortable when I talk about this because we'll be in a setting and I'm like, hey, see that guy in front of him? I'm about to make friends with him, and I'll like quote Vegeta and he'll be like, Dragon Ball Z.
That's our love language. So keep
so
doing
it's kind of this secret recipe of and the thing with Dragon Ball is less obscure now, but it was obscure enough.
Yes.
That people are like immediately, yes.
There was like more of a connection. Yes.
Like Star Wars is mainstream enough that if you see someone wearing a Star Wars shirt, they don't like say anything.
Yeah.
But if it's like Dragon Ball Z, they'll like see each other from across and go, Kamehameha.
Yep. That is so funny, man. It's so true, though. It's so true. Yeah, that's great. Do you like Naruto as well?
I actually haven't got around to it.
Oh, okay. You would like it. I think if you like Dragon Ball, you would like it. It's not the same, but it's like the spirit of Dragon Ball in terms of like the vibe, if that makes any sense. But it is about 900 episodes long, so
that's not in some ways that's positive to me. Like if I like something, I want there to be infinite seasons of it.
Okay, I mean there's literally like 600 some episodes. So
actually, that's not true. Supernatural should have ended after season 5.
How many seasons did it go past?
It's like 15 now.
Oh, really? Is it not over?
No, I think it's over now.
Oh, okay.
Season
it's
5,
like,
the main villain they fought was the devil.
What's that?
In like season 5, the main bad guy was like the devil himself.
And it went past?
Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy.
It's like you at that point you've just peaked.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh! All right, I do have to get back to. I started this. I could keep going with you forever.
Yeah.
This just shows that we need to. We gotta talk soon.
Yeah, white. So for white people, watch more anime, and let's be braver. Read your Bible, watch some anime, and this will solve everything.
100% accurate. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you guys for listening to the Almeida Initiative podcast. We will be back next week.